Okay. So, what we learned today, so we'll see all the capabilities of query interface as much as we can in the limited time we have. We'll first of all start off with very basic features like how to create a query, how to save it and share it with other users. There is features for scheduling query, that is to run automatically on specified intervals. And then we'll jump into advanced topics like subqueries, that is using output of one query in another query, and limiting specimens based on different criteria, especially the total quantity of the records. Then calculated searches, that is what we call as temporal queries. And finally, we'll also see some summary-based, count-based reports. Yeah. So let's get started. Before we, dive into the features, who can create queries? So when you see OpenSpecimen roles, so I'll be using our public demo site for today's webinar. So if someone needs access to the latest version of OpenSpecimen, you can go to demo.openspecimen.org and sign up for an account. You can play around the application. You'll get an account details and you'll be able to see the latest features. Yeah, and now going back to the roles. So every role has a set of privileges or permissions on different resources, as you see. One of the resources, queries. So by default, all the roles have access to queries, but some of the roles only have, say, for example, read access like researcher. But if you want to give them access to create, delete, whatever access, you would be able to edit these roles. And this is what entitles them to add new reports into the system. That is one thing. The other thing is what data they can access is completely based on what role is assigned to a specific collection protocol or site, and also if they have access to patient identifiable information or not. That is, if it is a technician, by default, they don't have access to PHI. So they'll not be able to see names, MRNs, and other identifiers of the patient in the query interface as well. So whatever role-based access is applicable during data entry, the similar permissions are applicable, or the data access is applicable during the queries. So that's about the roles. Now let's see how to first of all create a new query. So we'll take very simple example, how to find available specimens, which means that I want to exclude closed specimens, distributed specimens, and so on. So in order to do new queries, you can go from the navigation menu over here, and there is queries. So since I am logged in as a super admin, I see a whole lot of different menu items. But if you are logged in as other user roles, the menu items that you see would be lesser. So I'll go into queries. So as soon as I go into queries, first of all, let me explain this dashboard. So this dashboard will display a list of already saved queries. And these saved queries either might have been saved by your administrators and shared with you, or there are some default queries available as soon as you install OpenSpecimen. So these are very basic queries which are commonly used, and it also explores different features of OpenSpecimen. So that way, when you're creating new queries, you can refer to these default queries. For example, there are queries which are based on count-based searches. There are queries which are based on temporal. So you can refer to these when you're creating new ones. And on the left-hand side, you see different folders. So whenever you create queries, you can, let me select few default, select. Yeah, so these are the saved queries. And when I select these saved queries, you see that I can assign them to a folder. So as you create new saved queries, it keeps on building, right? So there might be too many queries and you might want to organize those queries. So that way you would be able to look at the queries easily. So here, if you see, I can put these into different folders like this. And when you create a folder, you would be able to assign it or share it with specific users, user groups, or all users if you are a super admin. So this is how you see all queries, then you see your own folders, and then you see the shared folders. Yeah, so let's now go ahead and create a new query. So this is the creating or query builder screen. So on the left hand side, the first drop down you see is available to restrict what protocols you are going to query on. If you don't select anything, it will search for specimens across all protocols that you have access to. So let me now say I want to look for specimens only from a specific protocol, then I can search from here. And the other point you need to remember is you need to select a protocol in case you want to search for custom fields. So we'll come into that later, but why I'm just telling you why selecting this protocol is important. Now, as soon as I select this, now I can go ahead and add what we call as filters, or what you want to search based on. So suppose I'm looking for specimens, available specimens, but I also want to add some more criteria. For example, I want to say these specimens should be from female gender. So whenever I select a field, this pop-up comes up, which is the operator. And these operators that you see, they are different based on the type of the field. So since this is a text field or a drop-down, you see equals, not equals, and so on. So I'm going to select equals for now, and then I'm going to say female and add this filter. And then so as you see, these are all the patient or participant related fields. Then there are visit related fields. Then there are specimen related fields. So now I'll go ahead and add, say, I want to look for plasma or serum. So here there is one more very interesting or useful operator, which is one off. This is nothing but in operator. So you can select more than one value over here. I can say plasma serum. But please note when you select more than one value here, this is doing an or, not and. So here if I select this and say add, so what this means is it will find all plasmas and serums from patients who are female gender. Now I want to make sure these are available specimens. In order to find available specimens, there are multiple ways to do it. If you are capturing quantity and you know that it always has the right value, you can always say available quantity greater than. Now you see, this is what I was talking about. Since I have selected a numeric field, the operators are completely different now. It is, it is having things like less than, greater than. Whereas in the text field you saw, it had contains, starts with, ends with. So based on the type of the field, these operators are different. Even you have between. So you can specify a range. This between is available both for numeric fields as well as date fields. So you can say collection date between 1st Jan to 1st March. So these kind of things. So now going back to our query, I'll say greater than 0. So I'm going to say available quantity greater than 0. The other way to find available specimens is, of course, you can put available status equals available, or the best way to do it is if you want to find only specimens that are stored in your freezers, then go to container details, select container name, which is nothing but your box name where the specimen is stored, and use this operator, which is called as exists. So I'll tell you what that means. If I add this filter, what this means is the specimen is stored somewhere in the freezer. So you're not specifying which box. So you're not saying equals box 1. You're just saying exists, which means that the specimen is definitely stored in one of your freezers, right? So that is when you will use exists, which means some of the other value exists for the box name. It is not empty, right? So these are some of the filters I have added. And as I'm adding filters, you see there is an AND operator by default. But if you click on it, if you want, you can make it OR as well. So like right now, let's keep it simple. I'm going to find all specimens which are either serum or plasma belonging to patients who are female gender, having specimens quantity greater than 0, and they're stored in some of the other box. Now, before I go to view records, I just want to make sure there are some records existing. If I want, I can just check get count. It is showing me the results. Then I go to view records. Now the next step is I want to now select what fields I want to see in the results. I want to see the patient name, maybe not the middle name. I want to see the gender, maybe race. Then I want to see the specimen details like label, type, available quantity. Where are they stored? So I want to select the container details, not I'm just interested in the container name and the location and the freezer name maybe. So now I'm okay with the fields. If you see, as I'm selecting the fields, I can also rearrange them. Suppose I want to see available quantity before type, I can drag and drop, which means that it rearranges the order of the columns. So now when I say done, now it is showing me all the columns that I selected, first name, last name. There are some patients, seems like they have more than one race. It's a multi-select. That is why it is showing me in 2 columns. Then I have the specimen ID or the label, available quantity, type. Then it has details about the box name, location, freezer. So this way I can add, when I'm creating a query, I can add filter on any field of OpenSpecimen, including custom fields or the dynamic fields that you create. And in the results view, I can see whatever columns I want, as long as I have access to that data. So now once I have this records, I can do a lot of other things. Let's now see what things that we can do. One is I can export this. It exports it into a CSV file. So you would be able to then open this in a Excel file. Then you can save this report. So I can just say specimens from female gender patients. So whenever I save a query, it appears on my dashboard. So this is now available only to me and all other super admins. So super admins can access all saved queries. If I want, I can now share it with other users. So for that, so this is the query I just saved. So I can select that, assign it to a folder. And when I'm assigning to a folder, if I want, I can also create a new folder. So here I can, if you see, one is I can share it with all users. Because I'm a super admin, I have access to share it with all users. I can share it with specific users. So I can select specific users like this. Or I can even share it with user groups. So suppose I have created a group for my own biobank, I can select and share this query with the group or the biobank users. Now, what is this option? So once you share a folder with, some users, if you want them to add more queries to that folder or remove certain queries from the folder, so editing that folder, do you want to allow it for shared users? Then you can do this. Otherwise, they will not be able to edit the shared folder, but they will be, of course, able to access the shared folder queries. Yeah, so that is how you save the query, which will appear on your dashboard, and create it and assign it to a folder, share the folder itself with other users. So now the other option that you can also do is, if it is a query that you're going to frequently run, you can also star them. If you see, I have marked some of them as star or favorites, so that they always appear on top and you can always, rerun that query whenever you need. So whenever you run a saved query, it is always getting the latest records. So if you have now today added more plasma serums under female gender patients, so the count would add up or decrease based on your filters. Yeah, so that's about creating simple queries. I'll just quickly see if there are any questions. What is the calculated filter on query page? We'll come to that. We'll be showing the user. Yeah. So okay, Sneha is taking care of the questions. Okay, so now let's go back to our, so this is how we saw how you can find available specimens which are not yet distributed or closed. Now let's go into more details like how to query for custom fields. So for new users, what is custom fields? So in OpenSpecimen, when you install OpenSpecimen, there is, default fields like, participant name, specimen type, available quantity. These are what we call as default data model fields. Now there might be research studies where you want to collect additional data like smoking history, family history, pathology information. So for this, there is a form builder where you can add new fields to OpenSpecimen database. So that is what we call as custom fields. So in order to query for custom fields, now let's go ahead and let's go back to our original query. I'm just going to remove certain queries and make it simple. So here I have, first of all, as I mentioned before, you need to first select the protocol, because in most cases, the custom forms are attached to specific collection protocols. So if you want to search for custom fields across multiple collection protocols, then you need to create a collection protocol group, and those would appear as well. So suppose if I search for some group over here, imagine I have created a group called Coalition of Cancer Cooperative Groups. This might have 10 to 15 collection protocols. So this is actually the group. And now when I select a specific collection protocol or group, that is when the custom fields attached to that protocol or group is shown. So I'll just go back to my demo longitudinal protocol. So now if I go under participant, the fields you see in the beginning, these are all default fields. Now if you go scroll down, the collapsed mode that you see here, these are all custom fields. So you see there is chemo annotation, there is environmental exposure, health annotation, patient smoking history. So I want to find all the patients who smoke more than one pack per day. So I'm just going to say greater than one, add. So this is showing me now participant, patient smoking history is the form name, number of packs per day is greater than one. So now when I say get count, so there are 11 patients who have these many specimens. Now if I want, I can add more conditions to this. Yeah, so now if I want, I can add, say, I want to find, say, lung tissue specimens. I want to find only patients that have type. Now this time I'm going to use contains operator. I'm going to explain you what that means. So type field has, tissue specimens like fresh tissue, frozen tissue, fixed tissue. So I want to find all types of tissue. So I'm going to say contains tissue instead of saying each and every tissue type. So contains means it is going to just find the, word tissue in the type value. So now I want to add more conditions. I'm going to say anatomic site equals lung. Then if I want, I can add more conditions like pathology status is normal or malignant and things like that. But as of now, let me see, hopefully there is data. Yeah. So now I'll say view records. So since this was a saved query, it is bringing me back the same columns that I had saved before, but I can add more conditions or columns to it. I want to also see, say, for example, laterality, anatomic site, since this is a tissue specimens. Now, if I go back, so if you see it added those columns as well, they're all lung tissue, and I can see the laterality as well. Now I'll do one more interesting thing to this query. I want to see the diagnosis value, but I want to filter the diagnosis value in the results view. So what I'll do is, so the other thing you need to understand is in query, it shows all the fields of OpenSpecimen and custom field. Sometimes it might be, difficult to find that, the attribute or the field name. So there is a search over here. So if I want diagnosis, I can just search from here. And here, now I'm going to use another operator, which is all, which means I want all values of diagnosis. I don't want to add a specific filter, but I'm going to use this parameterized option and say add. And now when I say view records, there is a new thing that you see on the left-hand side. So this is what we call as the parameterized filter. So based on the values, the records over here, it is saying that there are patients with belonging to these diagnoses. I can select then specific value and it will show me only those. So the parameterized filter allows you to filter dynamically in the results view. So similarly, I can add more here. So here I'll add gender all. So I'll show you. So this will, especially for saved queries, the more parameterized filters you add, it will become, less restrictive, right? So they can, so this seems to be there's only female gender in this results, but so here you could be able to dynamically look for certain values that you want. Yeah. So when you now save this query, it saves the filters, it saves what columns you have selected, and the parameters that you have selected. These are all part of the saved query now. So if you see, if I'm trying to edit a saved query, it is asking me to either overwrite it and save it or make a new copy. So if I'm making a new query, I'll say specimens from patients who smoke more than a pack per day. Yeah. So I'm going to say save a copy so that the original query is not going to be overwritten. So this is how you can query for custom fields. This is a custom field. And then you can also add parameterized filters, which means that when you go to view records, those filters would be visible over here. So this is to make it easier for your biobank users. They don't have to, remember what filter was added to this query. They can just then query from here. So usually when you do parameterized filter, it's easier if you make it as all. So in the webinar questions, one of the users asked if you can make some value as default in the parameterized query. That is not currently possible, but it's a nice suggestion. We'll definitely take it up for future versions. But right now, whatever you can. So let me also clarify one thing. Here, it need not be all. You can also select specific values and then make it parameterized as well. Yeah. So for example, here I can say is one off and select all types of lung. Here, if I want, I can select all. Sorry. Yeah. So here and then make it parameterized. So it need not be all operator. You can select actual values and still make it parameterized. This way, when you go to view records, you will see all those values that you selected. Yeah, so then you would be able to say, okay, show me all tissue specimens from specific these values, and that will show it up like this. Yeah, so hope you got what parameterized filter is. One is you can either say all, which means for the list of patients or specimens based on these filters, it would show all the diagnoses that are available. Or you could select specific values like this and still make it parameterized. And when you save the query, it would save based on whatever you've selected in this parameters or the filters. Yeah, so that is how it would work. So that is how you can query for custom fields and make parameterized filter. So now we'll move on to more advanced topics. The next topic is temporal query. So one of you asked in the beginning, what is that calculated filter that we see on the query page? So we'll see. But just to give you an idea, temporal queries allows you to do calculated searches, which means calculations might be between two dates or two numbers. One of the very common example that we hear is users want to find time difference between two dates. It could be collection and frozen date, or it could be collection and receive date, or collection or processing date, and so on. So here in this example, we'll use these examples. First example that we'll see is number of specimens collected in last 3 months. Yeah. So for that, let me go and create a new query this time. So for doing calculated filter, this is the option that you use. And if you see, these are all the functions that you can use. So for the query that we were seeing, the time difference between two fields, whether you want it in minutes, years, or months, you can select that. Years, you usually use it for patient age calculation. So, okay, patient age calculation at surgery or collection time. So you would be using years between. You would be using minutes between to find time difference between frozen time and collection time, because usually you freeze it the same day, right? So let's find that. So let's say minutes between. So when you select the function, it will tell you what should be the operators. So the higher date, so would be here. So I'll say I can select it from here. The fields would appear from here. So I'll say frozen time. Date. I'm just going to select collection date and receive date for now. Yeah, you don't have to worry about how these are appearing. So if you see here, this it just converts into certain format. You don't have to worry about that. You just have to make sure that there is a comma in between. And you can also put things like this should be less than 30 minutes. And you can also put conditions like this, and you can give it a name as well. Yeah. So this is time difference or something like this. So this is how you do calculations, and you can add it and you can search for the queries. So just to show you more examples. So this is time difference between frozen and collection time. So this is, if you see, it has frozen time and the collection time greater than 5 minutes. So again, you don't have to worry about very complicated, format over here. As I said, you first select the function from here, from this drop down, then you select the fields from here, and you can give that calculated field a name. And when you go to view records, you would be able to see that calculated time over here. So this is the collection time, this is the frozen time. The calculation time difference is shown as the separate field. And even when you go to columns, along with other fields, you see the frozen time field as well as, there are two fields, I think. So here is that cell field you can select and see it as part of the results. So this is an example. There's one more example I would like to show, which is specimens collected in last 3 months. So this is generally useful for scheduled reports. So what I'm trying to now do is find all the primary specimens that were collected last month. So here, if you see, instead of putting actual dates, like if I put, say, for example, if I save a query and put dates as January to March. So every time I run the query, I need to change the dates. Here, I don't need to do that because I'm using the words last month, and that is 3. This will allow me to just save this query and run every 3 months. Then it will always see the last 3 months. So if you go to, so this is our public user manual. And if you search for temporal queries or calculated fields, here, if you go to date range, you'll see a whole lot of values that you can use. You can see, you can use last quarter, last calendar quarter, last month, today, yesterday, last 30 days, current week, last week. So there are multiple date range operators that you can use. And this, as I said, is useful if you want to execute or run this query on every 3 months or every quarter automatically. Then you don't have to specify the actual dates, and you can use these wordings so that the system will calculate what is the last month in according to today's date. Yeah. So now once I have this query, if I save this and schedule this, then I can, I'll be able to say, okay, run this on every month or, whatever, whenever you want it. And then you can also share it with others, or you can notify users as well. Suppose I say notify Neha, then what it would do is every month when every 5th of every month, I want to run it on 5 a.m. Then it would run. So if you see 5th of every month, it would run and it would send a notification to Neha that the report is available for download. And she has to, of course, log in and download, because we never send any attachment in the emails, because it might have some identified information. So Neha would be able to log in as soon as she gets an email notification and download the report whenever she needs. So that is what how you can create scheduled reports, and this is usually useful for count-based reports or these calculated number-based reports and so on. Yeah, so that's the calculation part. As I said, this you can even do um, calculations between two numbers, like, if you want to calculate percent or whatever. So it has to be either a number field or a date field in order to do the temporal or a calculated filter. So this is other is let me also show you the patient age example. So participant. Yeah, here if you see. Yeah, here if you see, years between current date and date of birth is less than 40. So I want to see all the patients who are as of today aged less than 40. But you can also, instead of this current date, you could use collection date. So which means that it would calculate the age of the patient at the time of the collection or at the time of the visit. So you could add any date over here. So that would calculate the age difference. Yeah. So usually when you use these operators, which is years between, months between, or minutes between, the higher date would always be first, and then the lesser date would be second. And you could then put any operators or conditions like this. So this would bring back the age of the patient. So here, if you see, you're only capturing the date of birth, but you are calculating the age using the reporting. So now if I don't know if there is data. Okay, there is data. Let me show you view records. So this will bring back all the patients who are less than 40. Maybe this is a bigger data. So yeah, so here if you see all the age that you see, they're all less than 40. Yeah. So this is the calculated fields, and we would definitely recommend that for this particular feature, because initially you might find it complicated. You use this wiki page, which has a lot of example temporal queries. So if you see, it has example queries for age of today, age at collection, and then it has time difference between frozen and received date. So there are all these examples that you can refer to using this wiki page. So that's the reporting for based on calculated fields. Now let's look at summary reports, which is nothing but count based reports. So in the reporting module, for every field, we have these aggregate function. Of course, it all depends on the type of the field. If it's a numeric field, for example, quantity of the specimen, then you can do all these like min, max, sum. Whereas if it is a text field, then you can only do count. Yeah. So now let's look at again some examples. First, let's see how to create a count-based report. So let's see specimens categorized by type and availability status. Again, let me create a new query. Here I'm going to use always this study because I know there is data in here. Yeah, I'm just going to put some condition like say specimen availability status equals available. I don't want to put any other conditions. Now, when I say view records, and remember when you're doing count-based reports, only select the fields that you want in the report. Don't select additional fields. It will mess up your counts. So I'm going to only select, say, the specimen fields. I want to count the specimen. So when you count a certain object, that is specimen or participant, Make sure you select a unique field like identifier, label, name, so that you can count based on that. It will uniquely get the count. And then you can select other fields like, so what was our example? Type and availability status. So I'm going to use that type and availability status. When you go next and next, okay. When you select a field, then you'll see this count option. Yeah, because I said this is a text field, you only see count option. Whereas if you selected a numeric field like identifier, here you'll see there are a lot more aggregate functions. So right now I'll remove this identifier and go to the, so if I just select count based on label and say done, it's going to be getting me as column results like this. So it's getting me specimen count, then the type. I'm actually going to remove, sorry, I selected the wrong column, not available quantity. I want to select availability status. Okay. Yeah. So here is, the availability status, the type, and how many such specimens are available. Yeah. So by type. So this is showing me by column. If I want to see it in a different way, that is, if you have used pivot table in Excel sheet, then you could go to columns. This time I'm going to make it more interesting. I'm going to select anatomic site. And when I say next, in the last reporting options, in the report type, you see there is an option for pivot table. Here I can select whatever rows I want. I'll say specimen type, columns, anatomic site. And the value field should always be the aggregate field. So I'm going to say specimen count and say done. So now if you see, it is showing me in pivot table. So for example, if you see the, let's see which has some counts. Yeah, fresh tissue. There are two abdomen tissues. There are one abdominal esophagus. So by type and by anatomic site, it is showing me all the values. Yeah, so this way I can include any columns I want. You might want by gender and race, how many patients are there. So you can create such pivot tables. And again, these pivot tables can also be saved. They can be scheduled to run on a monthly basis, quarterly basis. So generally these count-based summary reports, you might want to generate and send it to your stakeholders on a monthly basis. So these can be saved and scheduled so that they automatically run. And based on these count reports, you can also create dashboards. So we'll come to that in a different webinar, but I'm just going to quickly show you that based on those count-based reports, you can create dashboards like this, which is nothing but graphs. So colorful graphs representing summary information. These are all created using the reporting module. We'll be shortly doing a webinar on dashboards and catalogs as well. I think we already did. So you can refer to that, how to create using these reporting module. So yeah, so that's the summary based reports. You can also do things like, tissue distributed based on different time, duration per anatomic site. So these are all possible using the summary count based reports using the aggregate functions, pivot table, and so on. So now let's look at the subqueries. Again, someone had asked in the webinar questions, how to get report results from one query and use it in another query. So for that, what you do is first you create your the base queries. And it's a very common example that we hear is you want to find patients with normal and a matching tumor specimens from the same patient. For this type of queries, you use this subquery. And how do you do that? I first created two different queries, find all patients who have breast tumor specimens. Then I have created one more query with find all patients who have breast normal specimens. So I'm just going to show you how it looks like. So this is very simple query. I'm finding patients who have frozen tissue from breast anatomic site and they are non-malignant or normal specimens. And the other query is finding all tumor specimens. So in my pathology status, I put malignant. So these are two different queries. Now I'm going to combine them and put it in another query. So for that, what I have done is, if I go back to my demonstration query, here, if you see, this is what is a subquery. So how do you create these queries? If you select, say, for example, you want to get participants from results of another query, you always need to use is one of as the operator, and you get this option that you see, records of another query. So I'm going to select that. And now it's going to select all the saved queries that I have done, which is relevant for the protocol that I'm querying right now. And now I can select, say, for example, I search for normal. So I can select this as my query. So this is how I selected these two queries. So I'm combining results from two different queries. And additionally, whatever conditions I want, I can add those conditions. And when I say view records, this is going to get only those patients which have both normal as well as tumor breast tissue specimens. So here, if you see, every patient has a malignant, non-malignant breast frozen tissue. This is how you include results from another query. Again, one more example is where you want to exclude. So in that case, instead of is one of, I can use is not one of. And when I say records from another query, say, for example, same normal, I select. So what this would do is, it would is not one of, because it's going to exclude values from another query. So now it's not going to get patients who have normal specimens. So for using records from another query, only two operators work, which is one of or is not one of. As soon as you select that operator, you get these option, which is records of another query, and you would be able to include from another query. So this is the example that we saw. Another example that one of our clients wanted is they want to exclude all the patients from which the specimens are already distributed. So when you want to distribute specimens to the researcher, you want to always find specimens from patients who have not yet donated specimens. Yeah, so, or distributed specimens. So here I'm excluding values from another query. So you'd be using the is not one of operator. So that's some of the features. Other features that you can do is when you go to the dashboard, if you want to delete a query, you do it from here. You can edit the filters by going here. You can download and import it in another instance. So generally what we suggest is, if you are trying out a new query, you always do it on your test or train server, so that, you know, something happens. Sometimes if the query is too large, or it might slow down the system or something like that. So it's always recommended that if you're doing a very large report, or if you're not sure how the report would work, try it on your test or training server. If you're satisfied how it works, you don't have to recreate that query on production. You can download it, and then on the production server, you can import it. So it will create the same query definition, not the values, just the definition of the query in another server. And then you would be able to run that saved query on the production. So that is one thing. And then you can also see audit logs as an administrator who is doing different queries. You can see all the audit logs over here. If you click on it, you can see the query. People who are technical, if they want to see the SQL behind the query that was run, you can see it from here. Sorry. Yeah, so that's the query audit. And then we already saw the schedule and download. So those are some of the other options. And when you do very large data exports, it will give you a message that it is running in the background, and you get an email notification whenever you are it's ready to download. This is only when it is too very large. And similarly, if your results view has a large data set, it will not display everything. For example, you got back some 10,000 records. What's the use of seeing 10,000 records in the user interface, right? So in that case, you would be able to download it and see the results. And when downloading, if it is taking time, it does it in the background, and then you get an email. The other point I didn't mention is, let me go back to my saved query over here. So if I select, so if you see there is checkboxes here, if I select, I would also be able to add to cart right from here, add a new cart. Cart is nothing but like a pick list. So generally when you're distributing specimens, you first query for specimens based on the filters that researchers have mentioned, create the pick list and add to cart. You also can do a lot of specimen actions right from here. You can bulk edit specimens, create new records. Similar to, so wherever you see list of specimens, you would be able to see these actions in cart, specimen list, query results. So these are things you can do from the results view when you select these columns or the rows. The other point I forgot to mention is some of the columns which are unique. It is also hyperlinked. When you click on it, that particular specimen object is opened in another tab if you want to see more data about that specimen. Similarly, for container, if you want to see this box, it would open that box view in another page like this. Yeah. So these are some of the basic other features. The other thing that we would like to cover is how you can search for child specimens based on characteristics of the parent. So here, this is nothing but hierarchical query, what we call, because in OpenSpecimen, let me just show you. When you create specimen, you can maintain its lineage, like what was the primary specimen, what was the child, grandchild. So the whole hierarchy is maintained. Now, when you want to query specimens, you can query based on specimens or the child specimen and add criteria based on parent as well. So I'm not going to go into much detail about this. I'm going to just show you an example query, but you can always refer to our wiki page how to do it. But the way it is done is you first add all the filters that you want to add for the parent specimen. So here my query example is show details of participant having DNA child specimens derived or created from parent specimen, which is of type tumor breast frozen tissue. So now when you're adding the hierarchical query, you first add filters for all the parent characteristics. So that is why you see here 1, 2, 3, 6. These are all parent characteristics. So type is frozen tissue, then it is collected specimen, anatomic site is breast, and then they are malignant sample. Once you add all the parent or the primary tissue specimen details, then you add the child details, which is the DNA specimen, collected specimen. So once you add all the condition, the child conditions, you put it in brackets. If you see here, there is parentheses or brackets. So you include the brackets, and in between the parent conditions and the child conditions, you need to add this value. So let me remove these and show you how to add them. So when you create the query with filters, it will look simple like this, right? So you have added all the parent filters, child filters. The next step is you select this. It will add the parentheses by default at the end, but you drag and put it in between the parent and child. Then you add the hierarchical condition, and this needs to be in between the parent and child. So that is after and before the parenthesis. That is how you create the hierarchical queries. Now, when you say view records, it will show me let me scroll to the right, the parent values as well as the child values. So one thing to note in the hierarchical queries is you cannot right now select different columns for parent versus child. Whatever columns you select the specimen, it would be shown for both parent as well as the child. So if you see, all these values are shown the same And the first columns are the parent columns, and then the child columns are shown. In the webinar questions, one of you asked how to see all the children of a parent. Here it's the same thing, just that you don't have to put all these specific conditions. You can just say specimen collected, and instead of frozen tissue, all these conditions, you could put actual specimen label. For example, if I say equals 1, 2, 3 as the parent label, that would appear on the left-hand side. And when I say in the child, just say maybe lineage equals derived or aliquot, it would bring all the child specimen of the specimen label I've selected. And it's not just the immediate child. So this hierarchical operator means it would bring the whole hierarchy under that parent specimen. So it could be immediate child, grandchild, great grandchild. All the child specimens are, returned or retrieved in the results. So that's an example hierarchical query that we saw, and you can do any type of such queries. So the final thing I would like to show is when you're usually this is again a very common query that people do. You have an Excel sheet which has list of labels. We downloaded one, right? So I'm just going to use that. So imagine I got this list from somewhere. Someone gave me this list, and I want to find more details about these specimens. So from my Excel, I copy it here and say specimen label. You select is one of, and just copy paste those values over here and add. So this will now add that as a filter. So this you can do it for any field like MRN, PPID. So if you have a list of such IDs and you want to find data or specimens related to that list, then you just do this is one of and paste that values from your Excel sheet. It could be even thousands. And when you say view records, then you can see whatever columns you want related to those. I'm just going to put some very basic ones. And so for these 24 labels, I pasted. Now I see all the values that I need. Yeah, so now if you're going to reuse this query all the time, I can also make this parameterized so that I can paste these values whenever I need. So I'm going to also talk about what this hide options means. When I say parameterized, whatever values I've added, it's copy pasting same thing over here, right? If I don't want to see these, I can say hide options and view records here instead. Now, instead of showing me each and every label, I can just now again copy paste. Suppose I'm just interested in 2 specimens. So it would bring back those 2. So this is one of you need to use as the operator. You can copy paste list of IDs like patient IDs, specimen labels, and search for those in the results. And if you don't want to see every value in your parameterized filter, you hide options. So this is something that is very useful. And you can save this query now so that you can then use this query repeatedly. If it is something that you're doing commonly, then you can save this query and use this as well. So these are the things that we wanted to cover today in the webinar. I think I'll stop now and see if there are any new questions. Yeah, so Neha, are there any other questions that are unanswered?
There's one question from Roth, so I didn't get a response for that. Is there a way to query for the earliest occurrence of a specific event? That question is yet to be answered.
No, yeah, so the only way we can think of is about how you can do it is you can use the aggregate function max ID on the event ID or the visit ID. So that would bring back the latest visit, but there is no function to get the latest event as such. So I imagine your question is if a participant has 10 visits and you want to find the latest visit. So the only way to do it is using the max column. So if you see, for example, if I go to columns and if I put visit name and identifier as well. So here in the next, if I go, you use this max so that it would get for that patient. So you make sure you select the patient ID also in your columns so that for every patient, it would always get the latest visit. So that's the only way I can think of to get the latest visit. Okay, any other questions? If we have few minutes left, if you want, you can now unmute and ask the questions as well. I'm just also quickly going to see the webinar questions that we had. So we already saw how to create query from output from one query to another. That is nothing but the subquery, and show all parent children of a specimen. That is using the hierarchical condition. Bulk import export. So export is one of the feature that is there in query, as well as if you want to do bulk export, if you go to any particular protocol participants list view, there is this export functionality. This also you could use to export list of patients, custom fields, specimens, and this could be for specific list of patient IDs, or it could be for all patients as well. This is another export. And import option, we have bulk import. This is a whole new topic. We can cover that in a separate webinar. So, but you could always use this wiki pages to see the bulk import and export as well. Search with multiple criteria and include columns. We already saw that. Count based report, whether is accessible to non-super admins. If you have any PHI field included, then it would not be. Make sure that the columns that you select are non-PHI. Then you would be able to, even use tissue banker login and see count based reports. These were some of the enhancements that someone has suggested. We look into that, FICA. So if you're there, but right now none of these are possible. But if you're looking for container definition, there is reports in the container module itself. You can export a container or use the utilization report, but in the query interface, you cannot download container definition. Yeah, this again was a query for hierarchical, but if you're asking about displaying different columns for parent versus child, that is not possible. So these were again other questions during the webinar registration. Anyone else? Last questions call for last questions. Okay, that's it then. Thanks everyone for joining. We'll be sharing the webinar recording, and also we definitely recommend that you look at the reporting wiki pages. It is very elaborate with different examples, sample queries. Whenever we get a support ticket asking about queries, we make sure that we document that in the wiki pages as well. Okay, thanks everyone. Thanks for joining. Bye-bye. Have a great day.